All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be an awesome podcast today. I'm joined by General Darren Werner. Right before we get into it, I want to shout out VetLife. VetLife is a 501c3 nonprofit company. It's a company of veterans for veterans. Every veteran faces difficulties when they transition from active duty back to civilian life, and VetLife is there to ease that transition. If you want to reach out to VetLife, you can do so through Instagram or Facebook, or check out their website at vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, Darren, I want to start this episode the way that I start all my podcast episodes. I won't ask you about the man that you are today yet. We'll build up to that. I want you to take me all the way back, and the listeners all the way back. What were you like as a young man? What was your family life like? What were the things that were influential to you, or the things that were kind of pulling you into the future that led to who you are today?
Yeah, so thanks, James. I'm a Michigan kid. I grew up in a little town in the Thumb area of Michigan called Mayville. I'm the youngest of 7 kids. My mom and dad owned a couple of small businesses, and we were their employees. So I spent my life, in my early years, working with my mom, working with my dad in our businesses, and we were self-employed, and our income was based on how hard we worked. Every one of my brothers and sisters were, they led the way in the businesses for me. And I eventually, by the time I was about 12, 13 years old, I was another employee of the family. So I loved going to school. I loved playing baseball. I spent my time in the winter playing hockey at the park across the street with the local kids in the neighborhood, and baseball in the summer. And when I wasn't on the field or involved in some school event, I was in one of our store, our gas station, our car wash, our arcade. I was in one of those places working with my family. My dad and my mom were great parents. They had their challenges, but they created a loving, respectful home for all of 7 kids. Each one of my siblings grew up and went on to do different things with General Motors. My one sister is a postmaster in a post office in Michigan here. I have another sister who became a small business owner. Another sister who's worked in the medical industry. All of them they've created their paths and really been successful independently. They have kids and really a great family to come from. So I've been very thankful and appreciative to my parents for setting that foundation, a safe, healthy place to grow up in.
Yeah, your parents really achieved the American dream.
Yeah.
I mean, they were entrepreneurs. They had a healthy, successful family. They raised their children, obviously, with enough structure and things that they were able to go out into the world that's incredibly complex and find different avenues of success, regardless of the fact that it wasn't the same avenue as them. The fact that they went out into the world and each one of the siblings has made their own way and came from this foundation, that speaks volumes to the type of people that you had as parents. And I'm sure you feel incredibly blessed for that. With that being said, I'm almost... a couple questions I want to ask you. First of all, you referenced athletics lightly. Athletics shapes a lot of people, like learning teamwork, seeing what leadership is, having a good coach, understanding consistency and hard work. How do you think athletics played a role in your development as a young man? And also, you were raised around entrepreneurs, and they tend to have like a different vision of the world, self-belief, certain characters of work ethic. You know, like it takes something to be an entrepreneur in this life. And I feel like you had the best of both worlds where you could witness that. You got to be around the sports dynamic. You got to get the standard scholastics that we get from education. What were you think were the pivotal things that really shaped you? And why did you not go the road of like trying to run your own business? Because what I'm hearing is, I'm like, man, that's laying the foundation for you to be the next generation entrepreneur. But obviously you picked a different path.
Yeah. So my parents really drove the family-oriented approach to what we did. And my mom and dad took care of everything we did was centered around our businesses. And so for me, as I looked at where they were and how hard they worked and the amount of effort they had to put in to get what they needed to accomplish what they accomplished, I saw that as that's challenging. That's a challenging path. From a standpoint of the athletic side, so just like every young young kid going through school, you get the opportunity to participate in sports. I chose to participate in sports. I really was limited a little bit because I'll be frank and say that, hey, we didn't have enough cash coming into our business to pay for health insurance. So my dad was fiercely afraid of me being injured on a football field, or so I played baseball, which he felt was acceptable, and that really drove my participation in sports. But what I gained from that participation is exactly what you said, James. It's about being part of a team. It's about winning and losing, and how winning and losing matter. And you can't just go through life and just always break even. You've got to strive to win. And that gets into the entrepreneur side. My dad was clearly, he was a veteran. He was drafted and fought in World War II. And his service taught him what it meant to win. And he came home from World War II and had a lot of issues. He was challenged by many things, from his exposure to what he was exposed to in World War II in the South Pacific. He came home and he built businesses. He built one after another, and each one had variable success, but they were enough success to take care of his family, which is a great story in and of itself. But I learned those two lessons from him is you can do anything you put your mind to. It just takes that energy. It takes the passion for whatever it is you're doing. And I learned that from his example. And I took that, and what I saw was his service to the nation was important. He demonstrated how important the nation was to him by just his actions, everything he did. Veterans Day, Memorial Day was always a celebration of his service. My oldest brother was drafted during the Vietnam era. When he came back from Vietnam, and he went on to do other things, he left his uniform at our house. And I can remember my dad slipped that uniform on and would march in the Veterans Day parades with my brother's uniform on. He saw his service as something that was incredibly important to the nation, and he was very proud of it. I picked up on that. My dad, we owned some wooded area acreage where we had quite a bit of trees, and we burned wood in our house. So another part of my life was going out to the woods and cutting wood and stacking wood and splitting wood for the winter, because we use that to keep our house warm. But one of the things my dad did was, in addition to doing that to keep our house warm, was he brought down about a 40-foot cedar tree. He cleaned it up, made it was a straight is an arrow, and he put that in our backyard, and it became a flagpole. And he would fly my grandfather's flag that was on his coffin when he passed away on that flagpole. And he did that with such respect to my grandfather, who was a World War I vet, with such respect for his service and to all those that have served. And I learned that from him, and I saw it and I felt it. It was an emotional feeling. That's what led me to enlisting in the Army when I was still in high school. I was still a senior in high school, November 15th, 1984. I went across our Tuscola County over to Cairo, where I jumped on a bus and went through the processing down in Detroit at the MEP station, where I entered into the National Guard. And I started serving in the Michigan. Well, I was actually in the Army Reserve. Initially, I started serving there in Bay City at a armory there in Bay City, where I hitched a ride with local guys who lived in my area to go to the reserve component sessions that started one weekend a month, and I started doing that. I was still in high school, and then off to basic training and learning to be a soldier, which I was extremely proud to be a part of. The best team that's out there. A team of American soldiers is probably that uniform that they wear is the jersey that I think a lot of people aspire to be part of. So that's just kind of my how I my childhood and where I came from. Just a local guy. I ended up after going through basic training, and I started Central Michigan University, which I'm a proud Chippewa. I'm proud of the university and how they carry themselves as a university. It's one of the universities in the country that have contributed more to our nation's Department of Defense than virtually any other. There's 163 general officers that have degrees from Central Michigan University, which I'm very proud of. I'm one of a few that actually went through their undergraduate program on campus who became general officers, but there's a significant number that have used Central Michigan to further their education in leadership and business and management to really be able to help the world out through what they do for our nation. And Central I'm proud to be part of that organization.
It's awesome to hear how much pride you have in your story, too. Like, your origin story makes perfect sense. You came from this hardworking, patriotic, American dream family that, like, it almost made your pathway into adulthood a little bit simpler. You witnessed what a good man was. You witnessed how he worked and sacrificed for his family. You saw the service to the country from your grandfather to your father to your brother. Like, it's a perfect lineage. It makes sense on why you're like, this is how you live correctly. Now, do you remember, and also I misjudged you originally when you were talking all about your father was an entrepreneur and these things. I actually, in my mind, I picture that to be like not substantial wealth, but like abundance in your life. Like, he's running multiple businesses. You guys have a lot of cash flow coming in, a lot of money. But what I failed to realize is a lot of entrepreneurs struggle tirelessly. I mean, they say like 90% of businesses fail within the first 5 years. It is brutally difficult to do things on your own. There's a sense of pride that comes with it that is very hard to replace when you actually make your own way. But most entrepreneurs definitely struggle. So you probably saw all of the sacrifice, all the hard work, all the best things to take from your father. But you probably saw the endless hours where, it's like sink or swim mentality, and it's, you never get a break. If you're an entrepreneur, you're not clocking into a job somewhere and then going home and just, brain shut off from work and wrestling with your family. You live your work, so it makes perfect sense. And I love to hear the lineage that you have and the love that not only that you have for your brother and your father, but that your father had for your grandfather. Like, that is such a proud story. And when we set things as idols like that, or we look up to ideals in life, whether it's people or characteristics or values, whatever it is, it pulls us in a proper direction. You know what I mean? It makes us want to be more than we currently are, because you're like, man, this is a great man. And if I strive for that and I use that as a trajectory, maybe one day I can become a great man. Do you remember before you enlisted, do you have any other dream? Did you have any other path? When I was younger, I thought maybe I was going to be this, before we transitioned to telling your military story. And then once you enlisted, did you know, okay, this is it. This is what I want. Was boot camp what you're expecting, et cetera?
Yeah. So my childhood was centered around baseball. I mean, I loved baseball, a huge fan. I followed the Tigers from the time I was born. I can recall my dad sitting on the front porch. Across the street from our house was a park and a baseball diamond. And my dad would sit on the front porch with the Tigers on the radio and kids across the street playing in Little League. And that was our life. My mom was a huge baseball fan, softball fan. She was the coach in town. So she coached girls softball, and was like my sisters played for her. It was one of the things that when you look at what our life centered around, it's centered around our businesses, and it's centered around softball, baseball. So that was my, as a young kid, I was going to be on the field at Tiger Stadium, snagging ground balls and hitting solid singles. That was my view. That's how I wanted to go. And, as I went through high school, and, the reality of athletics is you either got it or you're trying to get it. and I wasn't the best player on the team. I was just a player on the team and a part of the team, which is good. And, I had a group of friends from Mayville find my jersey and give it to me as a gift, framed with a picture of my baseball team. What a wonderful gift that was, to remind me about my origin story, as you've said, and where I came from. That baseball team, the Mayville Wildcats, that was really cool.
That probably means the world to you.
It does, yeah. And it was this really heartfelt presentation that they gave to me, just to say, hey, we haven't forgotten about you. It's been a few years, but we appreciate you. So I was very thankful for that, and that's really where I come from. And baseball was it for me. I really loved it, and I still do. I'm still a big fan. And the lessons I've learned, I think some of the people that I work with get tired of the similes I use to my baseball stories, batting average and where I fit with the team. I'm not the best player on the field, but I got a solid 300, and that's not a bad thing for whatever business you aspire to take on. If you can be consistent and you're hardworking, you contribute in a way that is immeasurable for organizations. And that's what I've done in my career in the Army.
And I mean, really the parallels for success, like you're saying, if you can learn how to show up at a practice consistently, you can learn how to show up for yourself in other aspects of life. If you can learn how to, guess what? No professional baseball player in history bats 1,000. It's never happened. Right. So what does that teach you? You're going to have to fail your way through to success. You're going to have to make mistakes. You're going to have to learn from your losses. You're going to have to accept that you're not the greatest, but you can improve over time, and it comes from hard work and dedication. There's so many things that kids learn in athletics. Like I tell parents all the time, even if you're not going to put your kid in martial arts is only one vehicle to develop your child. Put them in something. Put them in something where they have to be a part of an organization, or they have to be a part of a social structure or an athletic structure, because it's mirrored all through society. It doesn't matter where your child ends up in life. They will gain lessons in here so far beyond learning how to throw an arm bar that will benefit them for the rest of their lives. And it's like you've seen that in your life. You see reflections of that from your baseball days. And it's like you're probably a better man, better leader, better husband, better so many things because of Darren, the baseball player, as a kid. And it's weird to think of it like that, but it really is true. So when you decided to go military, that's a brand new chapter. Even though you think you know what you're in for, you're about to find out if you do or not. And you're going to open this brand new chapter. You go off to boot camp. That hits some people hard. Some people go even more all in, and from day one, they know this is what I'm meant to do. I'm going to be the best soldier I can be. I'd love to hear about how your military journey unfolded. Did you have a relationship at the time? It's very hard on certain aspects of your life. Your identity has changed quickly. Kind of walk me through the story, and then what made you decide, like, this is my path permanently, and let's start to unveil how you progressed to where you are today.
Yeah, so my military membership really centered around my family's orientation towards patriotism and service to the nation. But it also revolved around the fact that I wanted to go to college, and there was no source of funding to get to college. So at the time, I saw an opportunity where I could go into the reserve, and I could gain some cash to help me get through college and not be a burden on my family. And so that's what I did. I enlisted in the Army Reserve as a medic, and I thought in my future was going to be going to med school and becoming a doctor. Thought that might be a path I could take. So I enlisted as a medic, went to basic training, started Central Michigan, working on a pre-med curriculum, and I did that for the 4 years that I was at school. Through that time, I got the opportunity to join the ROTC program at Central. So as a reservist, I did a split option or a simultaneous membership where I was in the reserve and serving in the ROTC. So that bumped me up a couple of pay grades. So I was getting paid more than just a private E1, which was very helpful for me to get through college. That was all helpful. And what I gained from that was the relationship between what service in a military organization is like, but also what it means to be part of a team. Ever since I was a young kid, when you put on a uniform, when you put on a jersey, when you put on something that makes you part of a bigger group, it feels good. There's no question about it that wearing the uniform, whether it's on a Sunday, didn't go into a Lions game, you're putting on a jersey in the crowd, or if you're a police officer and you slip your uniform on, you're part of a team and it represents something. It tells a story about who you are, and that's what I enjoyed. I enjoyed that part of a team, something bigger than just Darren Werner, but Darren Werner is a soldier in the American Army, a U.S. Army, supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States. And the words that go along with it all mean things. And what I've done over my career is I've made a point that it's not just about an individual. It's about how the team can succeed. And that's been my focus, and it's driven me through, and that's really what's kept me going in the military, because I didn't have a plan to join the Army at 17 and stay until I'm how old I am now, 50, 55, going to be 56. That's a long time to be wearing a uniform, and it's been a really worthwhile endeavor that I certainly am glad I made back early in those early days. But it wasn't an easy endeavor either. It was very challenging. You didn't know what was going to happen next. I had no idea that I would run across a person who had influenced my life and said, "Hey, you should join the ROTC program here at Central. It's a good program. This is what it'll do for you." I wouldn't even have known I had that opportunity, and I took the advantage. I listened to the individual, and he gave me great insight and understanding. That led me to getting a little bit more pay to help me get through college, but it also led me into a path that really has led me for the rest of my career. Went through the ROTC program, and at that time, 1989, it was a time when we were just getting ready to really cut back on the military. So there was a lot of uncertainty on whether or not I would end up in the active Army or I'd end up just as a reservist. And so, I had to go through the anticipation to determine whether or not I'd be selected to be on active duty, which was a big thing at that time and for me. And when I found out, it was a huge success story for me that, hey, I'm going to be a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army. And that was great. I was really excited about it. And that led me into a career that started pretty simply, and I was served as a artillery lieutenant early on in my military career. I didn't know where I was going to go, but I knew that I was going to spend the first 5 years serving on active duty, and then we'd see where it would go from there. And it's always been a check for me. It's never been, okay, I'm going to serve my entire lifetime as an Army officer. It's always been, every couple of years, it's a reevaluate. Where am I? Am I in a spot where I want to be? And I always have had individuals, whether it's family members, brothers, sisters, parents, or other people who I've come across who've given me a sense of purpose and where do I need to go and what makes sense. Never could have done that on my own. But when you can sit back and you can ask a colleague, someone who's maybe in your same shoes, just another person that's lived a similar life to you and has demonstrated, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and bounce it off and just talk that through. Just have that communication and not being alone, but reaching out and being satisfied with having a conversation with someone. And that's been helpful.
I think you've dropped incredible insight for people where you reference the fact that, first of all, we're connected in a way that we don't fully understand as human beings. And when you are a part of an organization, or you have a camaraderie, or you have a joint venture or a connected cause or a purpose, that is really what gives you fulfillment. When you realize that your efforts and actions and your life is contributing to something greater than yourself and is affecting the lives of other people positively, or is moving the needle or whatever metric that we're looking at in a positive direction, it is so impactful to your psychology of knowing that, I matter. I'm making a difference. I am doing something with my life that's worthwhile. And a lot of the times you see people that their lives are not in order and they're a little bit in chaos. They rarely have a sense of purpose. They rarely have something that they're serving where they're like, I am doing something for a greater good. And it's like that is such gold insight because it's what has pulled you through your story. And I love the fact that you said at multiple points, it's not like I just blindly set a cruise control once I joined the military and I said, I'll go wherever this stream goes. You said, I reflected upon my life. I talked to the people that were close to me. I looked at the impact of my efforts. And when I recognized that I was making enough of a difference or I was valuable in the roles that I was playing, I knew I should continue rowing down this path. That is such a profound statement that should help people to realize that, like, it's not just about you. It's about your contributions to this experience that we're all sharing together. And you also come from a different world than a lot of the younger listeners where, at least when I was young too, and I'm only 35, but when I was young, patriotism and military service and, honor and like servitude to something greater was held at such a high standard. Like I grew up in a world where like a Navy SEAL was the American hero. You couldn't get any bigger than that. And I'm sure you watched cultural shifts over your lifetime. But nowadays, like I was recently talking with a couple people that are in the military recruiting aspect, and they said like it's very difficult to recruit young people now because we've almost lost a little bit of, what would you say? Maybe patriotism or maybe knowing that their efforts will move the needle in a positive direction. And you are living proof of that. You were like, I set out on a course almost by chance at some point. Some of those connections, you just happen to talk to this guy who said, try this, which led to that. Like the dots lined up correctly for you, but in doing so, you served a great purpose. And that's probably where you've drawn fulfillment for your life. When you look back, the reason you feel great about your impact is you're like, I have made a difference on the people that I've either been chosen to lead or that served alongside or fought for, right? And that matters. And I made one more note to myself here where I really think that more people need to take on life as an adventure as you have. You don't need to know the future. If you believe in yourself, if you have a good foundation, if you can make decisions and allow life to kind of open doors for you at times. So many people are paralyzed by the fear of the future because it's all the anxiety about the unknown. What am I going to do? What about this? What about that? Sometimes you just got to trust yourself and say, this gentleman made this recommendation. I don't know where this will open, but let's give it a shot. Your story has been so easily flowing and easy to listen to because you're like, hey, I had this opportunity. I went for it. I saw if I could handle that responsibility. I went to the next stage. So let's talk about through your military journey, were there any really impactful moments that you remember dramatically where like, you were on the precipice of a major change or you underwent some major character growth or like, we went through September 11th, which was an incredible experience across this country. And we instantly united as a nation. There was probably moments where you were put into leadership roles that you might not have known you were ready for or not. If you were writing back and you were writing your own autobiography, what were the chapters of your story that you really found the most profound growth or the biggest insights? Or maybe if you're even willing to say it, like the biggest failures where you had to sit back and go, wow, like I need to take a step back and reflect upon the man that I am or how to grow. Let's unveil some of those parts of your story that led you to the man that you are today.
So, no question, there's a book that could be written that's full of my mistakes and my failures, and it gets back to that whole baseball reference. And, you're never going to be able to be that, perfect hitter, struggling to get 400 is a lifetime experience for many professional sports folks. And that's no different for me. I've made all sorts of mistakes. I've seen what it's like to go left when you should have went right. But the thing about that is, in your life, you always have the opportunity to make the corrections. To go and blindly just continue to make mistakes is really where failure is. And being able to see, okay, that didn't work. and be able to reset yourself and acknowledge and not hold it against yourself, not be your worst enemy and prevent yourself from being successful the next time is probably the one thing that I guaranteed, because I know I'm going to do something always, but if it's not right, I know that I've got the opportunity to make some corrections. And when it comes down to risk and risk management, I'm an expert in managing risk and looking at, is this a valuable effort? Am I doing something that's going to make a difference? If it's yes, then take the risk, make that effort. And if you find out it wasn't the right way to go, you can still adjust. That's where I've the lessons that I've learned have really always centered around, hey, just do something. Don't let everything creep up on you and overwhelm you. Move forward. Look to the future. The past is always something that people dwell in, and it really is harmful. It's really interesting. History is really interesting, but it's really about what are you going to do tomorrow, not what you did yesterday. And when you're always looking in the future, you can always recover from some of those mistakes you made. My mistakes, I've recovered from them. I didn't let them keep me down. I didn't dwell. I let them wash over me and just move on. And I'll continue to make mistakes. As I transition from the Army and retire, I'm sure there will be plenty of mistakes to be had, and I'll find them. But reality is, I'm going to make sure that if I do go on a path I shouldn't go, I'm gonna fix it.
And really, I mean, you're probably a better man now having made the mistakes if you course corrected.
Absolutely. The mistakes that you learn from everything you do. You learn from your wins. You learn from your losses. And when you pile them all up, you get a really solid view on what the future is going to be. That's my view on it from experience. I've made the mistakes. I've experienced those mistakes, and I've learned from them, and they've generated wins.
We have a saying in jiu-jitsu, and our professional fighters, like, we say it all the time. It's you either win or you learn. And it's like, and if you're not failing, you're probably not pushing yourself. You're probably not actually trying to expand. If you're not failing, you are not stretching yourself to find the capabilities of your potential, because that means everyone fails. And by failing, you are unlocking keys and insight that will allow you to go to the next level. So if you just adopt that mentality, I call it with my guys the growth mindset. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm losing today? Well, then that means I'm going to have less losses in the future, because losing today is the recipe to put yourself in line to fail less later on, or fail in more complex ways. Or, you solved this basic problem, but now you're the type of man that can handle this whole new setting that you couldn't even have chipped away at before. And then that's the mentality. It's like, it's either win or learn. And if you can have that type of bravery or courage or whatever it is, whatever confidence to say, hey, I might not get this thing right, but I'm going to give it the best of intentions. I'm a man of character. I'm going to try to do things with integrity, and I'm going to go for it. And at the end of the day, what else can I do? And the product of what I will become during the process is more important than the result. My favorite motivational speaker of all time, his name is Les Brown. I don't know if you know who that is. He had a quote that really propelled me when I had this dream of launching. I'm going to start my own fight team, and like, no one in my family's a business owner. They don't, so I was very blind into what I had to go into. But he would always say, what you become in the process is more important than the dream. And he would always instill in the fact that the outcome you want, yes, you want it. And if it works out, great. And it's amazing that you got it. But if you don't get the outcome you wanted, what you became in the process by seeking, by pushing yourself to be a higher level, by going for these opportunities, by taking new roles of leadership, by getting a promotion that you're like, I don't know if I can handle this, but going for it. What you become in the process is actually the reward. The type of character you develop, the resiliency that you'll have, the courage, the ability to inspire others. You become an ambassador for the person that puts their life in order by failing your life until you get it in order. And then you can say to the young kid, hey, you might not have all the answers. You might not have it figured out yet, but you can go for it. And in going for it, you're going to be a better man. So let's talk about where you're at now. Unless there's other, like I said, if there's any really impactful moments from your story to this point today that you'd love to tell in the podcast, I'd love to hear them. But if not, let's talk about like where you're serving the world in your current capacity. Who is Darren in his regular life now? Where are your efforts focused? What have you honed all of your skills into? And like, what are your goals now? Because everybody has to keep some type of, vision board, let's call it, that you're working towards. Like, what are you still trying to progress to? Where are your daily efforts? Where are your weekly efforts? What were the things that you would do, currently in your life?
So, James, I'm going to go back and just talk about two specific things that have really influenced me as a person, has driven me through most of what I've done in the Army, and then what I want to do when I leave the service. So, the Army, serving in the military, is a people business. The military 100% is about people. There's no question that we've got really cool stuff. There's M1 tanks, Abrams tanks are the like coolest piece of gear that you could possibly have strapped to you. There's all sorts of things about the material side of serving the military, but the military is about people. And I learned that as a young kid growing up in a little town in Michigan. I wasn't exposed to much diversity. I wasn't exposed to much. It put me in a platoon in basic training with people from all over the country, every walk of life, and you're exposed to a whole different culture, a whole different world. And when you look to your left and your right and you realize that the people on your left and your right are those people you have to count on, and you realize how everybody counts and you can count on, it doesn't matter, take away every way to describe a person, and that individual as a human being is you're going to count on them. And that's a lesson that some people need to learn. They need to learn that you can count on the people to your left and right. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't have to be the military. It could be anywhere. And it's an incredible lesson. I also learned there's a whole nother element to it. In the military in the early 90s, late 80s, it was an integrated military. Males and females served next to each other. But there was a big separation between what a woman could do and what a man could do in the military. And it was probably appropriate for the time, but we've gotten away from that. We've moved. And I distinctly remember as an artillery officer with no women in my organization, it was just men. And then transitioning into another field in the military where women were served, it was interesting. The very first female soldier that I interacted with as a supervisor for her taught me more than anybody could ever have taught me about what it means to be a leader. Because it was easy just serving with one gender. It was very easy, frankly. When you enter into a world where now you're dealing with all genders, all people, you have to understand. You have to be more accepting. You have to learn. You can't always speak first. You have to listen. There's a lot I learned from a sergeant named Angela Bullock, that a young woman who taught me, whether she realized it or not, what it meant to serve and work in a environment where everyone was equal and you respected everything they had to say. Because frankly, she knew much more about what we were doing than I did, and you have to be humble and you have to understand that. That's a really important point in my life where that transitioned me away from one way of thinking, which was pretty male oriented, into a world where, hey, wait, balance things out a little bit. Acknowledge that it doesn't matter male, female, it doesn't matter your gender, it doesn't matter your orientation. You can contribute, and if you're contributing in a positive way, I want you on my team. And so that was really important.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a human being that is taking their energy and efforts and trying to apply them correctly to benefit the mission, purpose, project, whatever it is, and they should be given respect as such. And a lot of the times we do take shallow viewpoints and think, well, I'm physically stronger than you. So that means, yeah, but that's one fraction of the puzzle. And you may be, and you may be not. But at the end of the day, it's a human being that's showing up just like you are. And if they're meeting the requirements and they're there for the same reason, it's like they deserve the same amount of respect. If not, a lot of times they're dealing with more difficulty because of judgments or, like physical limitations or whatever it is. And I love that you said that. It's like you go back to seeing people as human beings. And if a human being is willing to show up, give 100% next to me, I don't care if you're a guy, girl, tall, short, whatever skin color, I don't care what your religious beliefs are. I care about, are you a good person and are you genuinely trying to do the right things and do better? And the answer to those two things are yes. Everything else is almost irrelevant to me. And if we poured that viewpoint on the rest of society, the world would be so much better. If you looked at people as people first, then the quality of their character, then their integrity, then their honesty, then their loyalty, then their love, then how they live, and then way down the line, their occupation, race, whatever other things, those are just trivial factors. They're mundane. They don't matter, because this is where we should put our value in people. And that's how you see individuals. You know what I mean? And we currently live in a world, not to get off topic, that's very like group identity, mob mentality. If you are a underline, that must mean this. And it's like, we need to get back to what you just said. No, like, you need to give everyone the love and respect that if they're a human being I tell, not to get off topic, every one of my people in here, you are welcome in this building if you make it a point to aim up in your life. The only people I won't train how to hurt people, I'm not going to teach you how to be violent and how to strangle people and how to utilize jiu-jitsu or combat if you are aiming down, because the world has enough problems and things are difficult enough. If you want to aim down and you want to be a criminal, you want to hurt people, you want to be able to have explosive emotions and not control yourself, you don't have self-discipline, you don't self-regulate, then this is not the place for you. I don't care where you are on the spectrum. I care about, are you going to aim up? And if that's the answer is yes, I don't care about any of the other factors. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because that is you lightly alluded to the old viewpoints that existed that ostracized a lot of people and gave a lot of human beings a barrier to entry that they couldn't overcome. And at the end of the day, when you bring people together and you show love and compassion and understanding, it brings out the best in them. And when you bring out the best in people, that's where you move metrics. That's where you have a rock-solid team. The most powerful team is a team that loves and respects each other, and each individual does what they have to do within the unit. When you create that, you're a true leader. And we need more true leaders in this country. You said there was two things. You said you wanted to reference that, and there was one other part.
So the other one really is experience that I had while deployed in an environment of uncertainty, of confusion, I've deployed many times with the Army in Iraq and Afghanistan. I've been on missions that just as you'd expect from veterans. All of it was done in extremist conditions, what I took away from those experiences, and it was really from a leadership point of view, was how important it is to always look across your organization and understand where everybody is in that organization. Whether, you've got some leaders that can see, have vision and are moving out and have virtually no concern about what's going on around them. And then you have people that are in the corners that are challenged, that haven't spoke to their family, have no a real connection, and are losing it, are becoming a risk to the organization, but a risk to themselves. And I learned quickly that you can't just always be upfront looking forward and into the future. You've got to look at your organization. You've got to learn from your team. You've got to be out present. You got to be part of the organization and part of what's going on. And you have to really get in to see where everybody is in your group, in your team. And that was a lesson for me that you can't wait a week or 2 weeks and get to it eventually. You've got to do it all the time, right from the beginning. And you've got to be able to identify, because you don't always know what's going on behind the curtains for every human being. And when you assume everybody is in the same place you are, you're going to be wrong every time. And I learned quickly that you've got to be out there and you got to be communicating. You got to be face to face with people. And that was a great lesson for me. I've learned that over and over again, and it was just a matter of making sure I was practicing it. And many times I looked to some of the people that I worked with and had to thank them for helping them remind me that, wait, before we make this big decision on what we're going to do, let's just go check to see how everybody else is feeling. Before we make a big move or a big shift to the left or the right, let's go evaluate and make sure that when we do it, the consequences aren't going to be the second order effects are going to be detrimental. And that probably doesn't sound as impactful as some of the other things, but it definitely made a point for me that when you're in a position where things are uncertain, certainty comes from the leaders. And when you can step in and look people in the eye and listen to them, first and foremost, listen to what they have to say, that helps so much. It grounds you as well, and it helps you reinforce when you make decisions.
You hit the nail on the head so much. As a man that tries to be a leader, and I'm a coach to a lot of people in here, and I have a lot of people that are dedicating, it's different than military. They're dedicating, years of their life to try to become a professional athlete, and they're hoping that you're going to provide the tools and information and environment that can get them to success. I take that as a personal responsibility that, like, I will fail these people if I don't keep my eyes very close to all the variables that we can control, because there's a lot of variables you can't control. But it's almost like when people want to be leaders because of the respect that they attach to leadership, right? Like they think like, oh man, I'd love to be the leader because of this, or the authority, or whatever reason they're seeking being a leader. But they don't understand leadership comes with so much responsibility that is right below the surface. You almost have to wear this magical pair of glasses that allow you to see through the veil to people's inner worlds, to their struggles, to the culture that you have created right in front of you. It's not about whether your people on the spot do a certain task or not. It's everything. It's the way that they treat each other. It's the way that they interact with one another. It's the character that they're developing that is coming from your organization. It's the things that you tolerate. It's the standards that you set. And as soon as you let standards slip as a leader, you're actually failing your entire team. And a lot of leaders want to point fingers at times. Maxwell and a lot of people reference as low-level leaders. Well, this person's the problem, or that person's the problem. And I think gentlemen like you and I, we know that, like, no, we're the problem, because you set the culture, you set the standards. You are the one, if you're going to be in the role of the leader, that has to see past the veil and say, extreme ownership. We were talking about a little bit before the podcast. What am I not doing that is causing this symptom? It's like when your body's sick. When you have a symptom, it's generally because of a cause that's deeper than that symptom. And you can just treat the cause. Let's say you have a headache every day. You can take ibuprofen every day to get past that headache. But the problem is probably, are you drinking enough water? What about the exercise you're getting? What about the sleep? Are you maintaining a schedule? Are you stressing yourself to death? And leaders have this extreme responsibility that you have to manage that. And it's on you. And if you want to be a leader, you have to accept that responsibility. And so when you were saying, like, it doesn't sound like a lot to me, I'm sitting over here going, that is the like meat and potatoes of everything. If you can get a truly exceptional leader at the top of any organization, the organization flourishes. People are pulled up. Leaders create other leaders, other winners, people that can dominate in other aspects of their life. And a lot of the times, you don't like your leaders at first if they're good leaders, because they hold you accountable. They push you in ways you don't want to be pushed. They demand a level of effort or character out of you that you might be falling short of. And at first you don't like them, but then you love them. And it's like you've probably had men or women like that in your life that pushed you beyond where you were currently. And then when you look back, you go, those were the most valuable people in my life. And I would be a fragment of who I was had it not been for those people. So it's like when you said that to me, I'm like, that is everything. And I think anyone that has ever shared in a journey like this, they understand it or has had an impactful leader or mentor. So one thing that you lightly alluded to that I want to bring up is, first of all, you never transitioned fully out of the military. So I don't think like there's a loss of identity that happens to a lot of veterans when they try to integrate back into society that I think is so brutal of them. It's like they know who they are as the soldier, but they forget who they are as the human being. And when they're just thrown back into the world with no guidance, it is a rough process. But being over in Iraq and doing these tours, you see some darkness of the world. You see some things that a lot of people are sheltered from. And how have you kept a healthy mindset? How have you not been crippled by PTSD? How have you kept the wheels moving in the right direction and not, because if you look at veteran suicide numbers, you look at the way that PTSD plagues the military population and a lot of people in general. I mean, not even just military members. How about the family members of military members? How about the children that, might lose their father or mother to an experience like that? How have you been able to keep yourself together in this life? How were you able to keep your mind on right? What were the things that you did that kept you from the hell that a lot of people fall into?
So that's a question that I know a lot of veterans battle. How do they get through the time of the worst part of the time when you're immersed in what's going on around you? Well, it's probably the most unhealthiest answer that I could possibly give, because it's the reality of it, is you have to separate yourself from it. And it's not a healthy solution in the long run, because when you're there and you see the results of war, you see the results of inhumanity going on around you, to dwell in it becomes very, very, it's very difficult. I know that for me, it was, okay, we'll get through this period of time. We'll acknowledge that has occurred, whatever it is, and then we move on, and then we continue the mission. And that's always been, I think that's the mindset of most soldiers, most police officers, people that live in that space is, hey, we're gonna move on to the next thing, because that happened, it's over with, we're acknowledging it, it's reality, but now we need to move on. And I would say that if I'm no different than any other veteran you've ever talked to, I've put that behind me in a lot of cases. And I've had circumstances that have come up, and recently I've had circumstances come up where the reality that I experienced 8 to 10 years ago was brought back to the surface because of the circumstances. I served in an organization, and I had a Michigan soldier that was assigned to the organization. I didn't know she was from Michigan at the time. And I knew the soldier, and she was killed in a roadside bomb. Vehicle she was riding in was hit, and she was killed. She's from a local woman from Taylor, Michigan. And I had no personal connection with her other than we served in the same organization, and I'd crossed her path a few times. The story of that woman was brought to my attention again just in the last year and a half, 2 years. And I relived that moment, and for the family that's out there, I know they relive that every day. For me, I had to move on from that at that moment. And so it's that type of struggle that I think people deal with all the time, and I feel it. How do I get past it? I have a great team of people that I can communicate with. I have a wonderful wife who I've been married to for 25 years, who's always been a rock to be able to maintain a balance and to be able to talk to somebody and to open up and really expose some weaknesses. I've got two great sons who are inspirational, and they help when the challenge comes along. They're part of a solution, and I've got a great family and friends who if I need to turn to. Everybody doesn't have that. I know that if I really had a challenge, there's a list of people that I could go to help resolve it. So that's something that's out there, and it's real. Just that series of events that unfolded for me, to go back to the time and recognize, hey, this all happened. Meanwhile, I'm in Iraq, but meanwhile, back in Taylor, Michigan, there's a family that's suffering, that's going through this challenge, and when that all comes together and you acknowledge, hey, while I was there, getting through and doing everything I could, at the same time this was going on back. It's sobering, and you really recognize how that's still left out there. It's still there, which I think I didn't really realize before. It was one of those things where I just kind of put away, and there will always be something that pulls some of that stuff to the surface, and how you deal with it and how you acknowledge it. Yeah, it's there. It's real. It's not weakness. It's just real. And how you deal with that is really important. And people shouldn't be afraid to deal with it, to reconfront that time and acknowledge, yes, that happened. And you weren't the one that didn't make it out, but you carry it with you. And so, it's a way to go forward and to see things and to acknowledge that, we, as a veteran, and it's not just veterans, and I always want to make sure that we don't forget all the people that contribute in our country to the good of the country. And, you mentioned 9/11 a little while ago. It's today's 13th, 14th. We just got through a really significant day in our country's history. We can never forget what that day meant and the impact it had, not only on those individuals that contributed directly to the events that occurred on 9/11, but the downstream impact that it had on families, on everyone. It changed our life. It changed the world. And that is, although not as significant to this country, but, the same thing's going on right now in Ukraine. And what's impacting the people of Ukraine. And I know that's not a tight connection to most of the people in this country, but what's happening there is so significant. And, the work that is going on by those individuals to bring their country back into a state where they can feel safe is such a big deal. And that's happening around the world, and the contributions that people are making, and the job I just left, we were contributing in a way to support Ukraine with equipment and material, so they could run a defense to protect themselves against a country that's demonstrating that they just don't have the will to live in a society that is human.
100%. And I think you just drop some incredible wisdom. Like, listen, you can't change the past. And yes, there will be things where everything will fall to pieces and it's broken. And part of your psychology might want to sit with the broken pieces and make them go back together. And it's terrible things happen. Life has all kind of tragedies. Life has all kind of pain and despair and anguish and disappointment, and you lose loved ones. But you can make sure that your efforts try to make the best difference you can each day. And if you focus on that forward progression, you can still enhance a lot of lives, and you can help a lot of people, and you can escape some of the tragedies of the world, and you can make a difference. And a lot of the times people just get stuck in the pain of the past. And you almost perfectly summarized. I recently had a clinical psychologist on the podcast who was talking about PTSD, and he said, like, people do need to relive it. It's weird to think about it that way, but you almost can't run from the demons of your mind forever, or they'll catch up to you. You almost have to be willing to turn and accept the realities of your life. And like, if you could go back in time with a time machine and you could have fixed the damage of the errors, you would do that. But you can't let it shackle you to the point where you can no longer move forward in a productive manner, because then you're not only damaged from the past, you're damaging the present and indefinitely into the future, and everyone else that deserves the version of you that can still provide value to the world. And a lot of the times I feel like with the veterans that are suffering, if they realized that there's still a brotherhood or still a camaraderie or still a group of people that would greatly benefit from their healed existence, or that maybe just them taking one foot in front of the other each day, it gives you that purpose again. You're still needed. You still matter. You can still make a difference, because although that dispute or war period might be over, there's countless to come. And good men and women will be needed until the end of time to try to keep the darkness at bay, to try to keep evil in line, to try to serve bigger purposes. You know what I mean? And there's still beauty to be had if you can find a way to move forward. So, we've shot an hour of dialogue. It's been an incredible I've loved hearing your perspectives and your stories. Just anything that you'd like to say about your current organization or role or message to veterans, or, your current aim and trajectory in life, the things that you're focusing on, the things that you think people need to wake up a little bit about or pay attention to. Just any final message you'd like to put on the podcast, and we'll immortalize in time. And if not, it's been a true honor to sit with you today. I've really enjoyed the dialogue, and, we'll wrap this up.
Oh, thanks, James. Yeah, so, as I look into the future, and it's a little uncertain for me about what's next, I'll transition out of the military and move on to do some civilian things. And I've really learned to appreciate Michigan in a way that is probably unexpected. I've lived all over. I've lived in many different. I've lived in a couple of different countries. I've lived in several different states. I've experienced a lot of different environments, if you will. And coming back to Michigan and living here in Macomb over the last 3 years, it really has been I'm thankful to the Army that they put me here for this position and to work at TACOM for the last 3 years. But there was another piece to it. It got me around my family, which was wonderful. It got me around my extended family, who I only would get to see once in a while. All that's been incredible. But what I really have appreciated most about Michigan is the efforts going on in this state for everyone, not just a small group or just a portion of the population, but across the state. I love the fix the damn road approach to getting after making Michigan better. And the efforts that are going on across the state, and it doesn't matter political party, all of that is irrelevant to me. What's important is there are people in this state who are working hard to make life better for everyone, not just one group. It's everyone. And it's really, really impressive to me. And I'm thankful that I got the opportunity to come back here after being away from Michigan quite a bit, and seeing the great group of people that make up this state, the great group of people that are part of what is governing the organization, governing the state, and across the board. It's just been a pleasure to see that, and it makes me proud to say that I want to stay right here and not move on anywhere else. There's no place else I'd rather be than right here, and so that's really, really helpful for me. That made my decision easy. My future, I'm really excited about working to help veterans in this state and around the country take full advantage of what's there for them. It is not easy. I experience it every day. I was sharing with you earlier a story about just my own struggles that I have. As whether I'm a general or not, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I'm just another veteran in the Veteran Affairs Department, Department of Veteran Affairs, and to get benefits that I should be given is not an easy task. So I know for everyone, it's a challenge, and we got to make that better, and we can. I'm a firm believer that through consistent message, consistent persistence, driving a result that is going to be the right result for our veterans. We'll get there in this state as well as around the country. So there's good things going to happen, and I think we'll, with the right people, and I've met a lot of great people who are driving that change inside of how we treat our veterans and what we do for our veterans. I really am excited about it.
I agree 100%. And I feel the same sentiments. I always say, like, I really feel like I am so blessed with the spot I have on the map. I've been around the world. I've been in China several times. I've been to favelas in Brazil. I've been all over this country. And I don't know, and maybe it's a little bit of just, pride in the area that I live in, but I see people wanting to do better. And it's like that old saying, it's hard to beat the man that never gives up. And if people just stay on that mission that, like, we're working to make things in the Constitution itself a more perfect union, we should be working to look at the State of the Union and make it better for all parties. And like you said, it should never be like, let's implement a policy just to make the lives better for poor people or this race or this religious creed or this, that. No, how about how do we improve the lives of human beings collectively as a whole? Because like I said, we're all connected. It's related back to it. No matter what you're doing, we're all collected. We need to come together. We need to improve the quality of life for people. We need to have dynamic dialogue and conversation. And we need to be willing to look at the fact that your labels can't separate us. The moment you look at a label and say, oh, well, they're against me, it's a team mentality. And then your objective doesn't become solving the problem. It becomes winning for your team. And that's just garbage. We need to throw it out. We need to solve problems. We need to make people's lives better, and we need to give 100%. And we need to be able to separate good behavior, characteristics, qualities from bad behavior, and then move this society in the right direction. So it's truly been a pleasure to sit with you today. I really enjoyed our dialogue. I hope that more people in the community, in the veteran community, and in Michigan in general, get to know you and get to know what you're doing for the world. And just thank you very much for your service. And we'll wrap this episode up.
Awesome. Thanks, James.